Welcome back to the channel, Hot Topics Live podcast. I'm Kia, your host, and this is your reminder that you are amazing and you deserve to be living your best life possible. And this podcast aims to help you do just that. So stick with us. And next to me, I have my girl, Kaola. She's back in the house. It's been a minute. How are you, Kaola?
Yes, I'm doing great. I'm still podcasting from Paris, so same
Back
place.
from Paris. It seems that that's where I find my co-hosts, in Paris most of the
Yes.
time. So I'm really excited to have you back because we have a great episode and we're going to be talking about domestic violence, and because nobody's really talking about it.
Mm.
And like 2 weeks ago, I noticed on Netflix that the Amber Heard Johnny Depp trial documentary was the new episodes that were out. And it's interesting because what they've done is they've put his testimony and her testimony side by side, and they've used all these clips from all the YouTubers and
Mm.
TikTokers that were commenting, and the podcasts that were commenting about it. They used a lot of that information as well. So I find it really interesting because I only watched clips of the trial on YouTube, if you remember from our
Yeah.
last episode that we did on the trial when it was happening. So it's been over a year now, and I don't know, watching this, I feel different. I feel
Yes,
different.
I do agree with you. And actually, I was shocked by the whole thing that they were going through. It's been like 6 years that we're
Mhm.
going through this case.
Mhm.
So, I mean, we know little about what happened privately. So, yeah,
Yeah,
that's
that's true. We don't know. That's one of the biggest things. I'm like,
Mm,
we don't know what happened behind closed doors for
yeah.
sure. But what we do know is that, in my opinion, that relationship was toxic. Feel free to drop a comment below and tell us your opinion. I'm curious to know what you all think about Johnny Depp and Amber Heard in that trial, and or the Netflix special that's on. I'm currently binging it. And so I thought it would be a good time to discuss domestic violence because nobody really talks about it anymore. We know it still happens, but people don't really discuss it. You have to go seeking that out. And I really want to point out that it happens to men and women. So I think one of the biggest things from this trial was that it's not gender specific. It's just that
Mm,
men are less likely to report it and to talk about it, and to seek support because of the stigma around a male being abused, right? But I
yeah.
have known several in my life that have been in toxic relationships, and this could be just like where the couple is fighting each other physically,
Mm,
like they're both fighting each other, right? And it's
yeah.
not always the guy that instigates it. And I'm not trying to minimize. There are women who are out there being tortured right now, and my heart goes out to them. They're in these intimate relationships where they're being abused, but it is also happening to men as well. So I think it's an important topic. And our guest is our friend Angeline. She has been a guest on Hot Topics Live several times. She is an activist, a supporter of domestic violence survivors. She is an advocate, right? She has a podcast called Let's Break the Silence, and now she is supporting these women in a real way that we're going to talk about later in the show.
Mm.
And stay tuned till the end of the show because if you've watched last week's episode, you'll know that I have something special for you and you're not going to want to miss it. So without further ado, let's bring on Angeline and get it poppin'. Hi. Welcome back to Hot Topics Live. You're muted. I can't hear you.
Unmute yourself.
Yeah, no sound. You're muted.
Guess what? The mic was muted. I muted.
There you go. There we go. We're live. We just roll with it.
Yeah, we just go with it.
So how are you?
I am feeling great. How about yourself? You look great, Kia.
Thank you.
Wow, you both look beautiful.
Well, you know what we do, we're always trying to, treat ourselves and our bodies well and feel good, I think. Isn't that right, Kawa?
Exactly.
Yes. Actually, the new look suits you very well. So
Thank
I
you.
agree. Yes, the new look
Thank you.
does suit you.
And this is my Barbie era. So welcome to my Barbie era. I'm fully embracing it. So Angeline, catch me up. What is going on with Let's Break the Silence?
Well, a lot of things are going on. So with Let's Break the Silence, I'm in my 4th year of podcasting, and it's been it's been amazing. I actually last year I took a break, just a little bit of a break from podcasting. And then I came back to it in November, and I had a vision, to scale my podcast and also to, have more special guests on, and also start to implement, like now I have over 3,000 downloads because I decided to hire a podcast agency out of the Philippines. So they do all my graphics, they do all my reels now. I outsourced because there's a limit to what I can do. So the podcast was growing, but not to where I wanted it to be. So now, since that has happened, right now the podcast is in 8 countries, and including the Philippines, the UK, Switzerland, it's South Africa. So now there's a more of a demand for women to share their real life stories on my podcast. And also, also as far as my coaching program, I decided to launch a brand new empowerment circle movement membership program, which launched last month. So that went really, really well. And I have some clients right now, and I had to tweak, how it is like in podcasting. I had to tweak my messaging a little bit because it was just like the same old thing, but I tweaked some things. I outsourced, and my following has increased. I have a lot of support from TikTok now. So a lot of people are paying attention to my content. I mean, there is not a day that goes by that I'll hear from someone and they will say, your podcast has changed my life, because my goal for my podcast is for women to amplify their voice. There is power in your voice and sharing your story of how you came out of domestic violence. And I had a special guest about 3 weeks ago, and we've been friends for 3 years on Facebook. Mm-hmm. And she decided to tell her story, but it took 3 years. So my podcast is having an impact on many women. And I was just checking the statistics the other day. So the majority of listeners are from ages 25 to 44. Yeah.
Wow, it's a big, domestic violence, or I would say like abuse in intimate relationships,
right,
is happening in all age groups.
Yes.
It can happen in high school. It can happen,
I had a lot of listeners
late in life.
18. 18 to 24, and then it went to 24 to 40, and I was like, oh my goodness. So I have teenagers now listening to my podcast.
It's important work. It's important work
for young women, because you know what it is with young women, they feel lost. It's a whole different, like when I grew up, it was a different era of work, when I grew up. I mean, when, we went to school, went to college, we worked. I worked in my, parents' business, and then my uncle's business. I worked in the restaurant industry, then met someone, got married, and you know what happened with that. But it was just a different era. Now we have the power of social media and being able to connect from all over the world. And now we have TikTok. And I just I have 10.3K. So I have over 10,000 followers now on TikTok, because what I do is I broadcast a couple of days a week and I do a live. Plus I post a lot of new content about, what women go through, the pain, that they go through from domestic violence. And I've had many men reach out to me too. So yeah, because, there are some men who have gone through domestic violence.
Yeah, it's not gender specific at all.
It's not gender specific anymore. Nope.
So my question for you, I guess, is what are some of the stories that you're hearing from on your podcast? Like, what are some of the stories that have really stuck with you? Because I know on the Female Veterans podcast, I hear a lot of military sexual trauma stories, right? And like things that women experience in the military that are really traumatic. And I know there are many of them that stick with me and I just can't forget about them. So are there stories that stick out from your podcast for you?
Yes, actually, trauma, sexual violence, trauma, being raped at 19. I'm like, and then I say to myself, my story is nothing, but no, it is something, because I hear a lot of trauma. A lot of trauma.
Well, I mean, I think it's expected when women are opening up and sharing their abuse stories, right? I remember I had a roommate last year and she was on TikTok for a little bit sharing her abuse stories and how she eventually ended the cycles of choosing partners that were violent or aggressive towards her. And I think a lot of what happens is how we form our attachments to our caregivers informs how we attach to other people and the kind of people that we can sometimes attract. And we can end up in situations where we are unprepared for that kind of drama and toxic energy and aggression in our relationships. I had a guest on last week. She was not diagnosed that she was autistic until late in life. That's last week's episode. It's called From Prison to Fashion Innovator. So if you want to check that out. She shares her story about what happened to her in a women's correctional facilities. And now she's an activist trying to work towards prison reform. And she's also a fashion designer designing her own line because she's also an artist, right? But her experience that led her to prison started with domestic violence. And I thought of you immediately because her story was so heartbreaking that being that she was undiagnosed as autistic, she has unique needs and she was not equipped to protect herself or to see the red flags in a partner who was predatory, I would say, and who was targeting her primarily based on the fact that she's more innocent in certain ways. Right. And so she found herself in a situation where she was being violently assaulted. And that was like the snowball that ended up leading her into prison. Right. Wow. So it's heartbreaking to hear these stories. How do you manage? Like, how are you able to hear these stories and support these women and then set that aside to keep going with the things that you need to do?
Yeah, that's a good question. I had a woman who was on my podcast and she suffered no more suffering, but she wrote a book. So a lot of these women now have written books about their sexual trauma. Like her brother was stalking her on different pages. And it was horrible. And trauma and, suffering that kind of trauma can cause brain damage. That's one thing I've learned. Yeah, it can cause, brain damage, especially in narcissistic abuse. So there's a lot of things that I've learned. And when I hear these stories, I mean, I have a woman who's a client now, and she broke free from her domestic. She lives in Australia, in Sydney, Australia. She's amazing. She's one of my students now, one of my clients now. But when I hear the stories, they cry. Like I remember, like, you know, when I did my workshop it was about a month ago. It was just, I was talking about shifting limiting beliefs. Okay, that was my topic. All of them were crying. All 15 women were crying.
Do they share any similar limited beliefs?
They do. Some did, some didn't. But there was a woman who just like, she broke out in tears, and she actually wrote a post in the private Facebook group. And she said, I guess my marriage is not as good as I thought it was. See, it's just that they have that revelation. There's something that I say that triggers them that, you know, I wouldn't say it's in a bad way, but it's like, you know, they realize, oh yeah, see, gaslighting. And her husband doesn't care. You know, her husband, you know, doesn't care, and they're still married, but they feel trapped and stuck. And that's where I come in with the tools that I use. And I invested $50,000 in my own personal development and mentorship, and, you know, to teach these women that if I can do it, if I can break free from domestic violence, especially, you know, he was a high-powered businessman, and we were, you know, making six-figure income, and people thought that we were the Hollywood couple, but behind the scenes, it's not like that at all. My life was totally different. And I realized today, before I got ready for the show, that I was married half of my adult life. And I got married when I was 25, and I divorced and broke free at age 48.
Wow.
So now these young women who are coming to me, they're in their 20s. So I can understand what they're going through, because I went through the same thing.
But what are, like, I have a question. What are the same patterns that you saw that was repeated again and again in women that you have interviewed?
Okay, so the women who I've interviewed, they were physically abused, they were emotionally abused, financial abuse, which happened to me too. They were basically prevented from seeing their family and friends, that they would only be able to see friends if it was a mutual friendship, which happened to be. So those are similarities. Isolation, right. And I went through that. I mean, I didn't see my parents for years. And yeah, I didn't see my parents for years. And those are, you know, years lost. And we become brainwashed. It's sort of like, you know, we don't realize that this is happening. It's a vicious cycle that happens. And it will put you down the rabbit hole. Like literally, you'll feel defeated, low self-esteem, lack of self-confidence. And now that I am working with these women right now, and they also have anxiety too. So there's like, some have, you know, anxiety. They're in a toxic relationship, and they just don't know. They just are looking for resources. Now there's a woman who I'm going to talk to tomorrow. She has a toxic relationship with her family and her ex, and she really, really wants help. So what happens is that, you know, for me, I went through a mental breakdown. So once I reached, you know, my breaking point, and I had that mental breakdown, crying and everything, I was able to pick myself up and come back. And that pivoting moment for me was when I found $5,000. I wrote a check to my attorney for $5,000 to start the divorce proceedings. And I had to write a balance transfer check against one of my credit cards. But I said, what good is the money if you're miserable? And he had taken monies. He stole money from me. He also wrote $50,000 of balance transfer checks against mutual funds. So I found myself really in the hole then, $50,000, and basically living like a gypsy for 1 year, meaning that even though I had it was a limited protective order. So even though I moved upstairs, I was out all the time. I was staying in people's couches. homes. I basically was like living like a gypsy, and I had a caseworker who worked with me for 1 year. So, but one difference I see is that they don't have support of the police. Now, in my instance, I had support of the police, the New York State Police, and I lived in Dutchess County at the time in New York, Dutchess County Sheriff's Office, the local police. I had full support, where these other ladies, they live in different states. There's no support at all. They just let the abuser keep abusing them.
Oh my God. That's
Yeah.
horrific.
It's
But the
horrific.
question is, I mean, I can't put myself into this kind of situations because I think it's very sensitive situation to be in. But I think there is like a trait that is common between all of these victims, is that they didn't have a male role model in their lives, or something happened in their childhood that made them to be dependent on their
Yes.
partner. So could you speak more to that? I want to know more
Sure.
about. Yeah.
And that's a good point. I'm glad that you brought that up. Now, some of them didn't have support from the father or the mother. Or
But it doesn't have to be like that, right?
it
You
doesn't
could
have
have a
to be that
perfect
way.
family and then meet a narcissist and get slowly deteriorated from your self-esteem to that you're broken down to the point where you're accepting treatment that you wouldn't normally accept, right? It doesn't have to be that you didn't have a father or something like that,
Not
right?
necessarily, correct. Not necessarily. I mean, I was brought up, I mean, I grew up in the Greek Orthodox family. And, my parents worked hard in their business. So, I mean, I had a very good upbringing and everything. But it was like in the Greek culture, the male is dominant. And my mom didn't drive. She basically followed what my dad told her to do sometimes. But anyways, yeah, but like for me, I don't know when he was hiding it, like my ex was hiding it. Like when we first met, it was like, woo, like we were in New York City, we would go to the theater, we would go to, and I'm telling you, people thought that we were the Hollywood couple, but then later on, he showed his true colors. He showed, he was paranoid. Like he wanted to retire from the business. So I said, okay, well, I'm going to go out and work at corporate America because I'm not going to sit home with him. I made that decision to go out and work in corporate America. So I made a name for myself when I went out. And then the market crashed. We lost over $100,000 and he put me in a financial mess. And then one night he was acting up. He almost hit me and I called the police. And this was at 9. This type of violence happens in the evening. I mean, it happened with me anyways. So, when I called the police and they came, I took off. They, made sure that I got in the car safely and I took off and went to a hotel to stay for the night or to stay with a friend because he was just acting up, spitting on the floor, calling me all kinds of names, the C word, you name it.
So in these kinds of situations, because it makes me think of some clips I saw from the Depp Heard trial. And
That's
so
right. That's
right. So this kind of reminds me of this a little bit, but it's I think it's Johnny was like throwing things and he was acting erratic and slamming doors and she was filming him, right? And I remember in court they asked her, why did you film him? And that struck me. And I mean, I'm just saying, like, I would film him. Okay.
Well,
Like
me
if
too.
this had happened so
been
many
filmed. You
times.
ready for this? I was in the office. We had a 4-bedroom house. So listen to this. I was gathering documents so I could, pursue my case. And he came into the room. You know what I did? Took the phone, the camera, and I started filming.
Yeah, because it makes you feel like these people want to hide. They want and men or women, they want the public face, and the public face could just be your friends and family or whatever, to think that they're these wonderful, charming, and a lot of times they're very charming people too anyway. So
Right.
they want people to think that they're these awesome, fun, amazing people. But behind closed doors, then it's like the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, if you get that reference, or they just change on you into like a monster.
Yeah.
And so you have this instinct of, let me film it, because one, if they know that you're filming it, or if you're filming it,
Mm.
they may stop. Or number two, like, it gives you this kind of sense of safety in a way.
Right.
Number two, you have evidence. So if you need to say, hey, look, this is what my partner was doing last night to a friend, because sometimes you're not sure. Like,
Right.
it seems
Exactly.
really silly, but sometimes you're just not sure that if you're being abused or not. Like, you're just not 100% sure. You're like, I
Mm.
think this behavior is making me feel uncomfortable and unsettled and
Right.
anxious and bad. But this person says that they love me, and they're
Mhm.
not always like this. It's just happens every now and again. So I'm not, let me get a second opinion on this behavior,
Well,
right?
it's a toxic behavior. It's a
Hmm.
toxic, I'm sorry, it's a toxic behavior that they're displaying. And, I'm saying to myself, why do I need to live like this? So there comes a point when you reach your breaking point, and I reached my breaking point, and I said, I'm just going to move forward, and I am determined to win my case no matter what. And I did.
It's amazing. One of the things, like, I've heard your story a few times on
Hmm.
different episodes that you can see on the Facebook page or find them on the YouTube channel,
Right.
or listen in audio form on Hot Topics Live podcast, anywhere
Yes.
you listen to podcasts, right? I think they're not every episode's on the podcast, but I think a few of yours are. And one
Mm.
of the things that strikes me about your story is that you were married for a long time before this behavior started. And when he finally got to the point where he actually did hit you, and he like broke your nose and sent you to the hospital, right?
Mm. Hmm.
It was already years into your relationship where you had no idea how bad, because there was financial abuse being taken place, subtle emotional and mental abuse taking place, and you hadn't realized just the extent of the abuse you were experiencing until it went that far. And
Right.
that's always the part that sticks out to me. Like, I just can't imagine being with a person. Like, what do you think about this, Kala? Being with a person for like 10 or 15 or 20 years, and then
Mm.
suddenly they punch you in the face. Like, what do you think about that, Kala? Isn't that
I just can't
just
imagine if
strange?
that happens to me. But yeah, it is strange, but I think it's we actually change through the years. So
Hmm.
Mm.
our first version of 1 year, it might be different than fifth and sixth year. And if two people do not communicate enough and do not evolve at the same direction, there will be chaos. And I think relationships are very complicated because
They are.
you have to understand where the
Oh, today,
person,
forget
yeah.
about it. Today. Yeah.
So, what do we have to understand, Kala? You were
Yeah, I
saying?
mean, relationships are very complicated, and we have to understand the upbringings of the person that we are with and
Mm.
what are the things that triggers them, and really get into the psychology of that person. And I think communication is key. And I mean, life is hard. We can't just fake it and be like just happy couples. It just doesn't work. It's like relationships requires like really hard work. And even sometimes when I'm dating or I'm talking to someone, I'm like, okay, this is very hard work. I need to put
I
some
know.
effort to
It
it.
is. It is.
It's
It
not,
is hard work.
It is hard work.
yeah, it is.
Today
Hmm.
it's hard work. That's why
I
I'm
mean,
single for 14 and a
it's
half
like,
years. But, I'm fine. I'm happy. I travel solo. I'm good. I'm good. I'm good.
yeah, but I think lazy people are the people who are single because I mean, you need really to put a lot of work in order for the relationship to work. You need to work on yourself and to be also active listener to your partner. So it's
Mm.
not that easy to be in a good, healthy relationship.
I don't know if they're lazy. It's like a strong way to single right now. I feel dragged.
I don't know if it's lazy either.
I'm talking
But
about
there's a lot
myself
of work
too.
that goes
So
into a relationship. Now I'm single,
Mhm.
so I'm not in a relationship right now. So some of my close friends asked me a while ago, "Are you open?" Oh, I said I am, but not the right person. Just
Oh, I'm selective.
I'm very
I
selective.
thought
I'm
I was
very
selective
single.
before, but now after my last relationship, I realize I have to be even more selective and more cautious and more reserved, right? Because they're tricky sometimes. They're really tricky. And people do change up. Like they present themselves in one way and as wanting everything you want. And then over time, the reality sets in of maybe they don't, or maybe
No,
they were just saying that stuff, or maybe, you know what I mean?
yeah.
So you
Here's
need
the trick.
time in, right? What's
oh
the
yeah,
Exactly.
trick?
But here's one trick is just try to be friends with them, Just like
that's me. That's what
don't
I
try
do.
to have the dating first. Just so you get to understand how they are thinking and where they come from. So because they will try to seduce you and make you
Oh no,
like their personality and show you something that they are not actually. But when you become friends and you show that you're not interested, you kind of see like different behaviors coming up.
oh you do, you do. Tell me about it. Even in a friendship, you do.
Mm.
You do. You see a
Yeah.
difference. Like they start to gaslight you. They start ignoring you for no reason. What's the problem? And I'm the type of person that I'm direct. I'm very direct with people, and I've
Mm.
had a recent evolution of male friends. So now there are top creators from TikTok who follow me now on TikTok, and they are in the mental health field, meaning they're mental health advocates. Yeah. So
Mm.
this whole
Yeah.
revelation has happened in the last, probably I would say 4 months. So,
Mm.
because there's a lot of men who are speaking, there are some men who are speaking out on mental health. They are. They
Oh yeah, I know several. And I
are.
think it's important. This is important. And I know that Hot Topics Live tends to have a larger male audience. So I like to include the fellas because I love men. Okay. I'm raising two sons. All right. I've been married a few times. I clearly like it and married. So I like men. And I think that it's an important time that they should be talking about their mental health issues and emotional intelligence and working on themselves, because that way we can mitigate some of this domestic violence that's happening. Because if we're all working on our mommy and daddy issues and we're working on ourselves and becoming self-aware and being honest with ourselves, or being willing to go to therapy to handle our anger issues, right, then we're less likely to perpetuate the violence in relationships. Because I think the big thing from, and I want to definitely get each of your thoughts on this, the big thing from the
Mm.
Depp versus Heard controversy is that I think they just were in a toxic relationship. I think they were abusive in some ways to each other,
It takes two to tango.
right?
Mm.
Yeah, it takes two to tango. And Johnny Depp, I know I defended him last year because
I
like
still
during the
love him.
trial, yeah, well, so do I. But then, like afterwards, it's like,
But I wouldn't date him.
no, me too, never. And he's in my age. He's like
Yeah.
59, my age. And nope, I would not date him.
Mm-mm.
And I think
No.
he's gone through several relationships. But that's just the way it is. I think in acting, it's very hard for them to maintain a relationship. That's just
Yeah.
what it seems like to
Oh,
me.
yeah, I've had that experience. I dated an actor. It was hard for him to maintain that relationship. No tea, no shade. I'm not going to disclose, but he could
Wow.
not manage it. So,
Mm.
but I will say this also with Johnny Depp, there's a lot of drugs and alcohol involved,
That's
right?
true.
Mm.
That's
And
true.
so when you have an addiction, you're going to have toxicity, severe addiction just because if you don't know what you're doing, if you have I was with a person who used to have blackouts at one point in my life.
Wow.
And they would do things during these blackouts and not have any recollection of it. Okay, my younger self was less healed, but hey, I'm full disclosure, right? So I chose this person, and I will say probably partially because I had a somewhat chaotic upbringing. So I chose someone that repeated that pattern in my life that brought a bit of chaos into my life, right? So it's about self-awareness, I think, sometimes too. And but it was such a difficult relationship because of that, because of the blackouts and the drinking and as time went on with the drinking and how aggressive the person became and how unable they were to manage their anger while they were drunk, that it just got to a point where the relationship had to end because I recognized it as abusive and toxic in a lot of ways, right? And it wasn't that I had to escape, and it wasn't that I had to be, I don't consider myself a survivor as a lot of the women you interview do, but and I was able to walk away from that relationship, but it took me a while to walk away from that relationship and recognize, hey, this is really toxic. This is becoming toxic. It is taking me out of my normal, natural, nice, kind, sweet behavior and making me a different person, making me more aggressive.
Oh, it makes you a different person.
More anxious, more anxious in this person's presence at times when I see them drinking, right? Or more angry to defend myself because I feel attacked in that situation, right? And there were a couple moments where it got a little bit towards violent. And that was where it was going to be, because I'm a woman who will defend herself, right? So when I felt that energy, I just knew that it had to end, because I was like, this is bad. This is bad. And so that's kind of my story. And I can see where Johnny Depp's drinking and drug use definitely played an impact on, like I mentioned earlier, the video of him slamming things and just being erratic and unhinged and angry. Who knows what he was angry about? Maybe he had some legit reason, but the behavior itself could be for a woman scary to see her partner, who is physically more dominant than her, acting in this unhinged way to make her feel unsafe. Because as women, we really need to feel safety, and men should feel safe too. There was a moment in the trial where he was saying, go ahead, I know you want to hit me, and she did. And they have her recorded on the podcast, like it's like a podcast, but it's like a recording of her voice, where she's talking about how she hit him and how she started that physical altercation, right? And it's just a cycle of toxicity, of where it's he's doing things, who knows, maybe she's intentionally doing things to trigger him so he freaks out so she can record it. I don't know. The point is, none of us were there. But what we can say is that, and a year later, looking back at all of that, is that both of those two were toxic, and they were absolutely toxic together. And I think that she may seek out people who will participate in that, because of the biography of Elon Musk and what his biographer is saying now, saying that was the most painful relationship of his life. It was very violent, but even his ex-wife says that he's argumentative because of, childhood wounds he received from his father. So he's combative in relationships. And so those kind of energies, when they come together, it's going to be toxic. It's going to be explosive. And they often attract, because like attracts like.
That's true. That's who they are going to attract. So unless you heal from that trauma, you're going to attract that same person. And I'm completely healed from domestic violence. So now I'm able to help other women.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. It's a beautiful thing. I mean, it's a passion of mine. And this all happened from a vision I had 4 years ago. And I remember when you helped me, Kia, with you were one of my, I think you were the second or third special guest of my podcast.
Mhm.
And yeah, that was amazing.
I can remember sitting down and saying, "You want to start a podcast,
Yes.
Angeline? Okay, I'll help you. This is what you need to do." And literally gave you a 2-hour crash course
You
in
did.
podcasting, which I coach podcasting, and I coach people.
That's
I have
great.
coached thousands of people at London Real Academy, and now I
Mm.
coach on my own as well with my
Good.
private clients in my own membership group, teaching people how to get started, independent podcasters, to start like a hobby podcast or one for their small business or something like that.
Right.
And I love it. And I just remember how I do this over 2 months is my point. But for you, it was 2 hours. And here you are. And every time I see you have a new episode, my heart just smiles.
Thank you. Consistency. I have
Yeah.
over 100 episodes now on Apple and Spotify and Google and all the other live streams. And also my YouTube channel has grown to over 850 subscribers because I had a viral
Fantastic.
video. Yeah. A couple of viral videos. So
That's amazing. People care about this topic. The mainstream doesn't talk about it, right?
That's true. They don't.
Is it the same for you in France, Carla? Does
Mm.
your mainstream talk about domestic violence?
Well, in France, they are very feminist.
Oh, they are.
I mean, if like to see France statistics, like you have a high level of violence against women here. I don't think it's different than the US. But here, I think there is a lot of support for women. There is a lot of service supports for women here against the violence. Yeah, but I think it's just we focus a lot about women's that they have received violence, and men too. They receive a lot of violence from women, and there's like recent statistics in World Health Organization. They said that it's estimated that around 1 in 4 men have experienced violence against
Yes.
women. So yeah, I think maybe men, they do not seek help like women do, because women, they need to talk and connect and seek out help.
And they're
But
shamed.
yeah,
They're
men, they are
ashamed.
more
They're
ashamed
ashamed. They're, yeah.
about talking about that, especially I feel, especially in France.
Mm,
Wow. That
Yeah.
is so interesting. I mean, I think it's the same here where men feel more stigmatized and shamed. Even we were talking about mental health issues. Like now we're seeing more and more men forming groups and supporting each other and healing like father wounds and healing it, what they need to heal to feel their best as men, which I love seeing, because when they feel their best, they treat us as women better. And when we do our work and heal our wounding and work on ourselves, and we can treat our partners better, and then we can see less and less of these toxic relationships,
Yeah.
or domestic violence situations and violence in intimate partnerships. And I since we're nearing the end of the episode, I just want to take a moment to say that if you are out there and you hear this and you are suffering or you're not sure, there are resources out there. I linked some in the show notes in the description of this episode. You can reach out to Angeline. You can follow her on Instagram. I had her Instagram up here. Let me put it back up again. You can follow her, reach out to her for support. She can offer and provide you some resources.
Thank you. Yes.
You do not have to go through this by yourself. Even if you're not sure if you're in a toxic or abusive relationship, seek support, seek help. There are resources out there for you. You do not have to suffer alone. You deserve better. You deserve to be living your best life possible, because you are amazing. Just because you were born, just because you're here. And people love you and need you. And even if you think that no one in your life does, someone that you might meet in the future will. So it's important. You just never know to recognize that you are loved and wanted and deserve to be living the best life possible. So if you need support, don't keep it in. Reach out for support.
Yes,
Reach
reach
out for
out. Don't
support.
be afraid to reach, because we all need support. You cannot do this alone.
Yeah.
There is no way. There's no
Mm.
way. You cannot do this alone. Seek help and seek resources. And obviously, reach out to me, and, we will have a little coffee chat. How's that?
Male or female?
Male or female? Listen, I actually had a male guest on my podcast last year.
Did you?
Yes, he was my first male guest, and he
Great.
travels throughout the world. I mean, he lives in Florida now, but he wanted to share his story, so I brought him on. It was huge.
I can just imagine. I'm gonna have to go check that one out, because
Yeah.
I'm very, like, I don't know. It's very curious to me what men experience, and I think
Mhm.
maybe because I have two sons, that
That's probably it.
I want them to feel safe to seek
Mm.
support if they need support, or to come to me if their girlfriend is mistreating them, or if they're not sure. So I think it's important, and there's a lot of gender politics going on right now, and I'm not down for it. Right. I
Me
think
too.
united we stand. I'm old school. That's what we used to say when I was young here in the United States, right?
There you
So
go.
I feel like if we unify, we're stronger.
Exactly.
And so I think we need to support each other and instead of tearing each other down
Mm.
based on gender, we
Yeah.
need to be finding ways to build each other up. I'm not saying just turn a blind eye. I'm saying, be real, but like, let's work through it and build each other up and come
Right. Let's
together
build each
in
other
unity.
up.
That's my take on it anyway.
Oh, yeah.
So Angeline, before we go, tell me, I know that you've been doing some amazing things, and you talked a little bit about it at the beginning, but you have a program that you have been coaching people, and you have clients now, and you're expanding your program to take on a few more people at a time.
Yes.
Let's talk about how you help them.
Okay. So it's called the Domestic Violence Empowerment Circle DB movement. So it is a 4-week program that focuses on self-love, healing, empowerment. How these are like strategies that I've incorporated to help me heal and thrive from domestic violence. So I have weekly coaching sessions with these ladies. So right now it is $27 a month, or they can pay $197 for the year. So so they can, so it's always, growing and evolving. I add new modules, but how I went from the depths of despair to freedom and liberation. And I talk about that. There's journal prompts. I also have a free 365-day domestic violence healing planner that I will give to someone who, decides to sign up for my membership program. So this program is to help women heal and feel empowered. Okay. This is, and this I feel stands out from the other. I'm not knocking other coaches, because I obviously, connect with other coaches, but mine is, I don't have a support group that complains. Okay. These women, like you go to different support groups, and a lot of them just cry and complain and they feel stuck, but mine is not like that. Mine, I help them move from feeling lost, overwhelmed, depressed, and I help them move into ownership and rediscovery. So it's like a self-discovery program. Yeah, it's a self-discovery program.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
I'm
thank
so
you.
glad you can help all of these people. This is the link. So copy that link down, do whatever you have to do, go check it out, share it with people that you think could benefit.
Yes.
Spread the word, because this episode is about surviving and thriving. You can thrive after you've been in a toxic relationship. You can thrive again after you've been in a domestic violence situation. So it is possible. You just may need some support, right?
Right.
It's hard to do it alone,
Yeah.
but it's possible. But
It's
it's
possible.
easier to do it when you have support like Angeline. So
Thank
definitely
you.
check that out.
Yes.
Angeline, I want to just get your final thoughts on the Depp versus Heard controversy 1 year later before we wrap up the show.
I feel a little bit different this year. I don't know why. I don't know why. It's just, I mean, regarding Amber Heard, and Johnny Depp, I mean, the trial was real. I watched it. I love the fact that they showed the trial. That was, the trial and just the conversations between the two of them. But when it's a year later, I feel different. I don't know what it is, but I just feel different. Um, there was a lot that they said. I mean, there was just a lot of evidence. But now I think 1 year later, like she's living her life now, and he's living his life, and so I just feel just very different about it this year. Last year I was all about. I still love Johnny Depp. I was all about Johnny Depp last year, but to go through that childhood trauma, the fact is, though, he hasn't completely healed from that trauma because he recently had a relapse. I read about it.
Yeah.
He had an unfortunate relapse. So it's a little bit different. It's just that was not a marriage that was meant to be.
No.
Too much toxicity between the both of them. So that is my viewpoint on that today.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Too much toxicity. There's just they weren't meant to be together, and so why stay together? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me. So I just feel a lot different.
Oh, you can have several great loves in your life. You don't have to stick with one that is not working. It is possible for you to love. You will love again. I promise. I have.
I agree.
I've had many. I will a few more times in this lifetime. So you don't have to stay in a situation that just doesn't feel good. Like I'm not saying run out, right? It does take work, but when you recognize that it's abusive or toxic, or you should be brave and try to find the support and help you need to walk away from a situation that is not good for you. Right?
Exactly.
We don't all get the fairy tale. We
don't
don't all get it.
We don't.
If the fairy tale even exists, right? Like, because usually the fairy tale is because two people really worked at it and tried to make it, or settled.
Right, settled.
Or settled.
Yeah, I know. It's just very different this year.
Yeah.
Very different this year.
I agree. I think last year I felt very
angry,
much
very angry at her.
Yeah,
angry at her.
Yeah, I was mad because I was like, she's ruining it for actual survivors, right? Like and then I felt very like, oh, this man is being abused. But this year, I felt more like, at rewatching the Netflix series, I felt more like this is a toxic relationship. Both of them had a role to play, but Johnny Depp was a mastermind at having this public trial that saved his reputation and his career. I thought it was very shrewd and smart, and I saw it from a different perspective of, I don't know, being more like a strategist than it was like marketing. This poor guy who was just, you know what I mean? Like, right? I just feel a little bit different about it. But overall, I don't feel like poor Johnny Depp, this woman was beating him or abusing him or pooping on his pillow, right? Like, to do things to him, to torment him. I felt more like this was these two toxic people just attracted together and had an explosive, chaotic, hot and awful, messy. I'm sure it was very passionate at points, but then passionate in a toxic way. And that's not a lot of times how right? That whole passionate, sexual relationship, and also passionate fighting.
Exactly.
Start questioning that. Some people don't think peace is boring because they don't know anything other than chaos. Just think about that. What do you think about?
There you go.
What do you think, Kala, before we wrap it up?
Yeah, I think it's just a lesson for all of us, this trial, that what happened, because a lot of people glorify Hollywood and stars and the actors, and they have the best life and everything's going well.
Reality
Um,
check.
yeah, and I think also it's just the important relationship that will also bring the worst out of you is the relationship that you have with the partner, because
Mhm.
it's all the trauma and everything that will come into this relationship, and people need to be aware of that, because even they say, yeah, I have healed from my childhood trauma, and I'm really good in a good state right now because I'm single. But once you are in a relationship, you're going to find other problems that you need to navigate through them. So yeah, it's important to understand that relationship takes hard work, and just we need to be aware of that before getting into engagement with someone. So
Yeah, and
Exactly.
marrying them and all of that. Take your time. Like sometimes it's a long engagement is good. Just keep
I
that
have
in
a
mind.
friend. You ready for this? They've been engaged for 25 years.
Okay,
oh
that might be too long.
no, that's
That's
too
too long, though. I'm like, let's get married already.
Oh my
They're just trying
God.
to get married.
Like,
I'm like,
I don't know if I could do 25 years. I'd be like,
and
dude,
he's a guy friend too. I'm like, geez, get married already.
like I think I would have left him. At like year 5, I'd have been like, it's time or bye.
Right, right.
Like we need to rethink this. Like, what's the holdup? I don't know. But hey, to each their own, not judgment. Anyway, Angeline,
Okay.
I want to thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, you're
It's
welcome.
always a pleasure to see you. I've got to run because I got to pick up
Me
my
too,
kid
and I
from
got to
school.
run too. But this
But
was
thank you
great.
so much.
Thank you both.
Thank
Thank you.
you. Thank you, Kia. Thank you,
Thank
Angelina.
you. Yeah.
I'm going to
Bye.
put you in the green room, Angeline, and then Kaula and I will wrap up the show. If you have to go, I understand, and I'll catch up with you soon.
Okay, very good. Thank
Bye,
you.
hon.
Bye, hon.
Oh my gosh, that was a doozy. I want to tell you what I am going to be doing on Hot Topics Live since we made it to the end of the show. Before I wrap up, I don't have time today. Sorry,
Okay.
guys. But it's these. These are called
Ooh.
soul truth cards, right? It's not a tarot deck. Sorry. It is not necessarily an oracle deck if that's not what you're into. So sorry. This is a self awareness card deck. So let's say we're going to play a game. And whoever you believe in, whatever you believe in, starting next week, okay, when you watch to the end of the show, I am going to pull one of these cards for you. And then if you believe it's from your higher self, from God, from Allah, from Buddha, from whoever you believe in, this message is for you. Specifically for you. Yes, you. I'm talking to you. This message is going to be for you. So tune in next week and I'm going to grab one of these for you. And this is going to be a message meant to find you. Okay. So,
Interesting.
right. I think you're going to love it. Tune in next week. We have another great episode. Set your notifications or else you might not know when we come live. Definitely follow along. You can follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Creativity at Hot Topics, the podcast on Instagram as well. Make sure you subscribe, leave a comment. Is there a topic that you want us to talk about? Comment below, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for coming.
Bye.